News Saturday. Here's Carol Simpson.
Good evening. Allied leaders spent this Saturday getting ready to hammer out the terms of Saddam Hussein's surrender. The United Nations Security Council moved toward adopting an official ceasefire resolution as the deadline neared for formal talks with Iraq's defeated generals tomorrow. At the same time, there are reports today that the war's aftermath has brought about a total collapse of civil control in the southern Iraqi city of Basra. More from ABC's Bill Rediker.
When Allied bombers attacked Basra 3 weeks ago, they crippled a city already ravaged by 8 years of fighting during the Iran-Iraq War. Now, reports that Iraqi soldiers returning from the battlefield have plunged the city into chaos. These Sri Lankan workers say they were freed from a prison in Basra by Iraqis angry with Saddam Hussein.
Basra city is everybody fighting. I mean, the people who support for government, the people who's not supporting for government. Now, since 90% of Iraqi people hate Saddam.
Tanker and lorries and army truck, everywhere fire.
In Riyadh, at the Allied Central Command, General Richard Neal says aerial reconnaissance confirms the disorder.
Some of our overhead pictures have indicated a lot of chaos, and I think the soldiers are bringing back stories of disenchantment.
To the west of Basra, U.S. forces in southern Iraq report another 1,000 Iraqi soldiers surrendered today and became the latest prisoners of war. The Allied destruction of abandoned Iraqi military equipment, landmines, and ammunition continues. But sometimes it's too late. Once again, 2 American soldiers died and 3 others were wounded when their lightly armored vehicles ran over mines. Tomorrow, when the formal ceasefire talks are held at this desert outpost in Iraq, tanks and Patriot anti-missile systems will provide protection as Allied generals meet with those they opposed on the battlefield only a few days ago. The Allies will demand that the Iraqis release all prisoners of war, turn over the remains of coalition forces, produce a map of the minefields, and draw a line separating Allied from Iraqi troops. Bill Rediker, ABC News, Saudi Arabia.
Regarding the peace negotiations, Defense Secretary Dick Cheney warned Iraq today that there is no ceasefire yet, just a suspension of military operations. Cheney said if the Iraqis don't respond quickly to demands for the release of POWs and third country nationals, the Allies are in position to resume military operations against Iraq. Journalists coming out of Baghdad report that while most Iraqi citizens are afraid to talk openly, some said privately that they are opposed to Saddam Hussein, that they blame him for the destruction to their country, and that they wish the U.S. had removed him from power. In the Iraqi capital today, the long-awaited release of a 4-member CBS News crew, including Bob Simon, missing since late January. More from ABC's John Donovan, whose report was cleared by Iraqi censors.
They were still wearing what appeared to be uniform pajamas when they were reunited with colleagues in a hotel room. It had been, said one, a long and difficult 40 days and 40 nights.
As you can see, we've lost a little weight. We've aged a little, but we're fine. This is a story that could have ended another way, but it's had a happy ending.
As the freedmen left for Jordan and eventually a hospital in London, the Iraqis said they let them go at the request of the Soviet Union, which was confirmed tonight in Moscow.
It was a very important role played by President Gorbachev himself, because he was persistently demanding an answer, definite answer from the Iraqi side.
Civilian life in the capital remains one topic Western journalists can report with relatively few restrictions. People here, still getting used to the idea that the war may be over, are returning to their city, if not quite to life as normal. Not when there is no electricity anywhere in the city. Shops selling generators are doing a good business. A small one, second-hand, sells for almost 20 times what the average Iraqi makes in a month. Over the next few days, there will probably be even more men in uniform than usual seen on the streets here, soldiers returning from the front. Today, the government announced that men between the ages of 35 and 38 called up for the war can now go back home. John Donovan, ABC News, Baghdad.
And now the situation in liberated Kuwait. The Kuwaiti royal family, still in exile in Saudi Arabia, has promised greater democracy once the emir and his relatives return. But in the meantime, they've declared martial law. The problem is there's no clear authority to carry it out. Here's Sheila McVicker.
In a southern suburb of Kuwait City, the Kuwaiti army continued to search for Iraqi soldiers left behind. There were reports of shooting in the neighborhood. The Kuwaitis returned fire. In the end, the army's target slipped away. Both the Kuwaiti army and the resistance movement have continued to search for soldiers and collaborators who'd aided the occupiers. But on the streets, even while Kuwaitis are enjoying their new freedom, there is no one in charge. There is no civil authority. The police are absent. In parts of the city, it is men with guns, but with no uniforms and with no apparent authority who control the roads. At this checkpoint, 2 Palestinians have been pulled aside. The gunmen said their papers looked false. They found Iraqi money. What would happen next was uncertain. What will happen to you now?
I don't know.
At a local police station, business is conducted outdoors. The Iraqis left the building full of ammunition. These men say they were policemen before the invasion. Only one has an identity card. They want to work, but no one has told them they can put their uniforms on. We're still awaiting orders, he says. So far, there is no one in higher authority to make that decision. Kuwaiti radio announced tonight the martial law rules that will be imposed here. They include dusk to dawn curfew and the right to intercept and read private mail. But martial law won't come into force until the Prime Minister returns to this country. And it's not clear yet when that will be. Sheila McVicker, ABC News, Kuwait City.
One of the great successes of the Allied military strategy was tricking the Iraqi army into preparing for an amphibious assault, which never came. But it drew precious Iraqi military resources away from the areas where the Allies did invade. Today, Jim Hickey saw evidence that the deception was complete.
French soldiers today began the highly risky business of clearing mines from a beach in downtown Kuwait City. It is painstaking work. They can't afford to be distracted, even by Kuwaitis celebrating their freedom only yards away. The beaches had been heavily fortified by the Iraqis. Anti-personnel mines were planted every few feet. Trenches run for miles. And at water's edge, barbed wire strung with more mines designed to blow up landing craft.
It was in this building that the Iraqis planned for what they erroneously thought would be an amphibious assault against them. They built a giant and elaborate model of the Kuwaiti coastline out of sand. That area right there is Kuwait Bay.
When Iraqi officers studied this map, they used toy models of artillery and tanks to mark positions. An American special operations officer, one of those who found the map, said every gun was pointed toward the sea. The Iraqis were completely fooled.
Basically, they looked like they were ready for a large amphibious assault instead of a direct assault from the south.
The beachfront is full of Iraqi pillboxes and bunkers with clear lines of fire out to sea. The fact that for months Allied forces practiced publicized amphibious landings was part of the plan to trick Iraq's commanders. It worked. Tons of Iraqi ammunition, some of it supplied from Jordan, are in the basements of buildings along the coast. Iraq prepared for a seaborne invasion that would never happen. Jim Hickey, ABC News, Kuwait.
Tomorrow, This Week with David Brinkley will have the latest on the peace negotiations. Among the guests, National Security Advisor Brent Scowcroft. Coming up, how the end of the war could help the economy. And later in this broadcast, the Democrats trying to set the post-war agenda on Capitol Hill, and the anti-war movement hoping to stay in business even though the war